Every time you sneeze in public, at least one stranger reflexively says, "Bless you," and neither of you really knows why. Turns out the answer involves the plague, a pope, and the ancient belief that your soul could physically fly out of your own nose. Let's start with the oldest theory, which comes from ancient Rome. Physicians and philosophers at the time genuinely believed the soul lived somewhere around the head and chest, and that a big enough sneeze could actually expel it from the body. A sneeze wasn't just an involuntary spasm. It was interpreted as a moment where your life force briefly left you, vulnerable and exposed, hanging in the air for a second before it either drifted back in or didn't. Saying something like, "May you live," or a similar blessing, right after a sneeze was meant to help usher the soul back home before anything else could grab it. And anything else is doing a lot of work in that sentence, because ancient people also worried that the brief soul vacancy created an opening for evil spirits to slip into the now unguarded body. So a blessing wasn't just a nice gesture, it was functionally an exorcism you performed preemptively, several times a day, on total strangers without ever discussing it. The Greeks had a related but slightly different take. They treated sneezes as a form of divine sign or omen, something the gods used to communicate. Depending on the timing, direction, or which nostril, a sneeze could be read as good luck or bad luck, similar to reading tea leaves or interpreting the flight pattern of birds. Xenophon, a Greek historian and soldier, describes a moment where a single soldier's sneeze during a tense military speech was taken as such a strong divine sign that the whole army immediately fell into a chant of thanks to the gods, right there on the spot. But the version of the story most historians point to as the direct root of the modern phrase happened over 1,000 years later, in 6th century Rome, during a devastating outbreak of bubonic plague under Pope Gregory the Great. Sneezing was one of the plague's early symptoms, which meant a sneeze in public wasn't a spiritual curiosity anymore. It was a genuine, terrifying signal that someone nearby might be dying, and possibly that you were next. Pope Gregory reportedly urged people to say, "God bless you," immediately after anyone sneezed, partly as a religious blessing for protection, and partly because it gave people something proactive to do in a situation that otherwise felt like waiting for a death sentence. Some historical accounts even describe sneezing being treated as such a dangerous sign during the plague that people would make the sign of the cross over their own mouths just from being near someone who sneezed, whether or not a word was even said. So the habit went from "your soul might fly out of your nose" to "you might have the plague," without ever actually stopping. The phrase and the reflex survived, while the reasoning behind it kept getting swapped out underneath, like some superstition relay race passed from one belief system to the next. There's also a smaller, more practical theory running in parallel. A sneeze temporarily interrupts your heartbeat's rhythm for a split second, and some older folk beliefs held that saying a blessing was meant to help the heart get going again, safely. This one is far less documented historically, but it persisted in folk medicine well into more recent centuries, alongside the plague and soul theories, all three explanations essentially coexisting and blending together over time. By the time you get to more modern secular use, the religious framing has almost entirely disappeared for most people, even though the words haven't changed. Nobody saying, "bless you," at a coffee shop today is thinking about Pope Gregory, souls escaping through nostrils, or plague-era paranoia. It's become pure social reflex, a tiny automatic politeness ritual stripped of its original meaning but never actually retired. So the next time you sneeze in an elevator and a stranger mutters, "bless you," without even looking up from their phone, remember, you're both unknowingly performing a ritual that started as an emergency soul retrieval spell, got repurposed into a plague-era public health response, and somehow ended up as elevator small talk. Not bad for 2 words. If you liked this, subscribe. Next episode, I'm explaining why we cross our fingers for luck, and it starts with 2 people, not 1. See you then.